our longtime friend and leader, Paul Greenwood, who is the retired district attorney from San Diego County, who is now enjoying retirement and yet still spreading all of his information. So thanks for coming on today. As a reminder, we have a variety of tools to help you be successful in this series. We have several things. So first of all, we value an interactive session. So if you could just go ahead and start off right now in the chat, add your name and sort of where you're from and maybe what brings you to this webinar today, something that's interesting to you. We also encourage you to type your questions in either the chat or the Q&A, whichever is most convenient to you, and we will get to those at the end of the session. Additionally, we are very fortunate to have ASL interpretation provided by California Department of Social Services. So if you would like to take advantage of that, just feel free to highlight that person in your feed. Additionally, we also have closed captionings. So select the CC icon on your toolbar. We will be back next month on the third Thursday at 12 p.m. Next month, we are going to be talking about different models for housing for older adults who've experienced abuse and neglect. And we're going to hear from some of our colleagues around the country to hear what they're doing about that. And with that, I am pleased to turn it over to our friend and colleague, Paul Greenwood, who's going to do a bit of a retrospective and talk about what he has seen over the life and breadth of his career and where we're looking to next in the fight for elder justice. Paul, I'm pleased to turn it over to you today.
Well, thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you all for joining us today. I believe this is my third presentation for Lunch and Learn, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And I have to tell you that this is indeed a very different type of presentation that I've ever given before in my certainly 25 years as a prosecutor, and even before that, doing other legal stuff. And the reason is because I am at a point in my life where I am becoming very reflective. And the major reason for that is because this week I actually celebrated my 70th birthday. And as I was coming up to this milestone in my life, it did in fact trigger within me a whole slew of different reflections on life. I think there are times in our lives when we go through milestones. Maybe you've gone through this with COVID. For me, it was approaching this new decade and looking back, but also looking at where I am today and looking ahead to the next decade. So I hope you will bear with me as I give you what I call a potpourri, a smorgasbord of different thoughts, of different ideas, of different reflections that have been flashing through my mind over the last few weeks. I don't have any particular sequence for this. It's kind of random. Normally my presentations are fairly logical in their progression. This one, though, it was just like I sat at the computer and I started thinking of different things that are age-related, some specifically to do with elder abuse prevention, prosecution, identification, but other things about life in general. And I hope that some of what I share with you can be helpful to you. So one of the things that I have been doing is asking myself, so Greenwood, here you are at age 70, what have you learned in your lifespan? And so I've been going through that series of questions in my mind. And this is one that it's a common phrase, but I subscribe to it. Age is indeed just a number. But as I started to expand upon that concept, I realized that it really should never define us as people. But here's the problem. We so often use age as a benchmark, as a yardstick, as some kind of tool to kind of measure where we are. For example, California defines an elder as anyone over the age of 65. And for years, I have advocated for an age-based definition when it comes to prosecuting crimes of elder abuse. The reason I've done that is because in so many other states around America, they do not use an age-based definition. They use a generic term called vulnerable adult, which I find to be challenging to prove the elements of vulnerability to a jury, whereas an age-based definition only takes a matter of seconds to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And despite what my sister sent to me this week in the form of a virtual card, just remember that when you're over the hill, and again, I'm pushing back on this concept of being over the hill, but this is her way of describing it to me. What happens when you're over the hill? You begin to pick up speed. So I will definitely take that from this card, that there's definitely momentum going forward into this new decade. But seriously, too often we base our judgments, our opinions on people based upon their age. We unfortunately have stereotypes a lot of different people because they're 75 or they're 85 or they're 90. And I've seen that. I've seen that so many times during my prosecutorial career. When I've talked to other prosecutors, when I've talked to well-meaning detectives and police officers in law enforcement. But here's what I have found time and time again. And I don't think this is just peculiar to San Diego County. I think this is widespread. I've had so many prosecutors and detectives tell me, well, Greenwood, I mean, look at your victim. She's 92. You know, she's not going to make a reliable witness. She's going to be forgetful. He's confused. It's going to create problems. We can't rely on his testimony. And unfortunately, because of that bias, and there is indeed a bias when we talk about ageism or people's ages, many good cases don't get prosecuted. When I have traveled around the country making presentations, I've often been asked this, you know, what is the major reason for why we don't see more prosecutions? And I think it's sometimes the starting point is because we have not got rid of or eliminated the biases about ageism. And then I've been thinking about what is important in my life. As I look back on a career in law of stretching over 40 years, what to me is important in my life? And the first thing, and I'm sure you would agree, is relationships. And in the last few weeks, I've pondered long and hard about relationships. And I've been very blessed because of my family. And the bottom line of that is because of my relationship with my wonderful wife of 43 and a half years. Some of you have heard me tell this story before. I had the good fortune to be traveling around the United States in August of 1973. I came to San Diego for 2 whole days, and I walked into a Baptist church, and I literally found the only empty seat sitting next to this gorgeous young lady, and I sat down next to her, and I married her. But not in the same service. That was 5 years later. But for me, Sue has been my rock and my foundation. And she has been the person to enable me to find and draw upon any strengths that I have lingering inside me. So I really have been blessed with this relationship. And, you know, one thing that has really saddened me during a 25-year career in the prosecutor's office is the number of colleagues that I worked with whose own relationships failed, often because of the pressures of work and the tensions of trial and other things. And I'm so glad that I've been able to keep grounded with my wife. She's the love of my life. And then there's my daughter and my son-in-law and our twin granddaughters. They mean so much to me, and I'm looking forward to celebrating in a couple of weeks when they finally come over from the UK and we go on a road trip around the national parks of Western United States. To me, this is part of, quote, retirement, spending time with your grandchildren if you're blessed to have them. And then there's my son, who we hung out with just this last weekend. We flew up to San Francisco, and there he was outside in the airport with a happy birthday balloon. He's our entrepreneur son living in San Francisco, and just so proud of what he's doing. But again, it's all about those relationships. And then I can't forget the foundation that my own parents gave me. My late father, who died at age 92 from advanced Alzheimer's in December of 2014. My mother, age 96, who died in November of 2019. They were truly a tremendous role models to me. Hardworking, disciplined, educators. My dad was a bomber pilot in World War II. My mother was a survivor of the Blitz in London. And I grew up with stories of World War II. And that was often the reason why elder abuse prevention became my career. And then I think of my mentors. Who has influenced me in my life? And the one person that I really always think back to is this gentleman. His name is Gibson Kiboko. After law school, I went and served with the UK equivalent of Peace Corps. And I was sent out to a tiny little village in Kenya, no electricity, no running water. And I was there for 2 years as a teacher. And this man became my friend, my mentor, my companion. He taught me more than anybody else how you overcome barriers of culture, of language, of race. And I owe him so much. I've also learned, especially in the last 4 years since leaving the DA's office, the importance of exercise. The 3-mile walks that my wife and I have been able to do pretty much 5 times a week has been extraordinary. To get out into the fresh air, to appreciate the scenery around us, and then nutrition, to eat right, to have lost 30 pounds since I left the DA's office, to feel as fit as I can. And as part of exercise too, to in the last year to have actually, and it's not a fad with me, it's a real thing, the Peloton bicycle. I just love that thing with music and pedaling. And then trying, and I still haven't learned the technique to do it correctly, but trying as best I can to balance work and play. You know, we've all heard that story of somebody on their deathbed, any regrets? And the regret is, I wish I had spent more time doing the fun things with my family or with my partners or whatever it is. Certainly less time on the work. So it's important to keep a good perspective on that. I've also learned that we shouldn't wait until a eulogy to express our feelings about somebody. And I've learned this from my wife, Sue, because it's part of her makeup that she wants to make sure that people understand in the moment how appreciated they are, that they are recognized for who they are and for what they meant to her. Why should we wait until somebody passes away in order to tell the world what we feel about that person. And that point was demonstrated to me for Valentine's Day, because my wife wrote to all the grandchildren of her mother. This is Sue's mother, Gloria. She's aged 92. Sadly, she's a widow now. We lost my father-in-law over a year ago. But before Valentine's Day, Sue reached out to every single one of the 12 grandchildren. And she asked each of them to send a letter to their grandma, telling grandma what she means to each of them. And this is our daughter, Rebecca, and this is part of her letter that she wrote. And Sue compiled into a book, and on Valentine's Day presented it to her mother. And I can't tell you how important this has been for Gloria. She keeps looking at it. She keeps referring to it visually and poring over every word. So I think that's what I've learned, is to take a moment to say thank you, to tell somebody, maybe today, even send an email to somebody, maybe a phone call, say, you know what, I need you to know this, how much I have appreciated you for all these different reasons. And at the end of the book, just to remind Gloria that she is loved by each of her grandchildren. I've also learned to find a passion for my work. You know, there's a survey that came out many years ago in California amongst lawyers. 75% of lawyers were disillusioned. They did not enjoy their work. And yet I can honestly tell you that in my 25 years as a prosecutor, I never once said, I don't like what I'm doing. I loved every single moment, but particularly what happened in January of 1996. Because back then, I got the call from my boss, the elected district attorney, calling me into his office. And I could tell he was not happy, and I didn't know why. And he told me, Greenwood, I've just had a very troubling phone call from Adult Protective Services. And I said, who are they? He says, I don't know, except I know they're upset. I said, what about? He said, apparently we are ignoring a huge escalating crime called elder abuse. I said, what's that? He said, I don't know, but you're about to find out, because I've just appointed you on the telephone with APS as our first ever designated prosecutor handling elder abuse crimes. That was in January of 1996. And typically an assignment in a prosecutor's office like ours would occur for only between 3 to 5 years. But for me, because this passion was unleashed, it became my assignment for the next 22 years until I left that office in March of 2018. But that passion has never been extinguished, because even since I left, I have wanted to stay committed into this whole area of trying to assist older adults in ways to reduce the risk of becoming a victim. Fortunately, there have been opportunities for me to share what I've learned in the courtroom with Adult Protective Services across the country, with long-term care ombudsman agencies, with area agency on aging organizations, with law enforcement, with other prosecutors, and with older adult groups. You see, back in January of 1996, there was no elder abuse movement. And in fact, the very first training that I ever went to in Sacramento in early 1996, there were only 17 people in the room, of whom probably half did not want to be there. And the only reason they were there because their boss had sent them. So really there was a hardcore, only about 5 or 6 individuals And the one person that I really owe so much to, her name is Candice Heisler. And many of you know her. She became my mentor in elder abuse. She was a deputy district attorney in San Francisco, and then subsequently she went out and did so many amazing presentations and trainings and writing manuals. And she still is doing that today. But back then, really, Candice was the only person who I could turn to. But things have changed. And in the 6 years since that time, I have seen things develop so much. But there's still room for more progress. And I want to share with you some things which I feel can be improved, some things which maybe we're doing better than we were, but I'm never satisfied with the status quo. I think that was something that my mother taught me, where she said, always set the bar high. Always have something to strive for. Always have a focal point, which is beyond where you are right now. And that makes so much sense to me. So I'm not content with where we're at today in terms of elder justice. But as I look back, I'm certainly encouraged that we have moved forward, but we're not where I believe we need to be. So one of the things that I feel has to change, and something that I feel now, because I am now free from any collaboration as a prosecutor, I can speak my mind. We need to call for more funding for elder justice initiatives, particularly for adult protective service programs all over the country and for long-term care ombudsman programs all over the country. Right now, I think it is abysmal. For example, if you take the number of child protective service workers in this country compared to the number of adult protective service workers, I would imagine that the ratio is at least 5 to 1. I think it could be as high as 10 to 1. And why should that be? Because you see, by the year 2035, which is only, 13 years away, there will be more people in this country over the age of 65 than children under the age of 18. So we have to understand that we are an aging society. The demographics show this. But the reality right now is reflected in this tweet from the Administration for Community Living. Funding for elder justice is 1% of funding for child and family welfare. Now that is outrageous. We have got to do better. And how can we do that? We've got to implore our county politicians. So in California, that would be our boards of supervisors, to let them know that they need to fund county programs where they can. We need to address our state legislature, our assembly and Senate members. And on a federal level, we need to contact our federal senators and the House of Representatives and let them know. Thankfully, we've seen some monies being targeted to adult protective service and long-term care ombudsman programs through the pandemic financial packages, but it's not enough. Nowhere near is it enough. So if we are to seriously address the escalating crimes being committed against older adults, and it's only going to get worse, we've got to deal properly with funding. In addition, we need more training for law enforcement. Some of you have seen presentations that I have given to law enforcement in which I have talked about misconceptions that law enforcement often falls into, which prevent them from successfully investigating and then referring cases to prosecutors. It is my hope that within the next 3 to 5 years, every single law enforcement agency within the United States will have received training and familiarity with this phenomenal resource called EAGLE. And I really have to give a shout out to the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., in collaboration with the Administration for Community Living, and particularly for the National Center on Elder Abuse in Southern California. You heard your presenter in January, Dr. Laura Mosqueda, who is the founding member of the National Center of Elder Abuse. And she's ably assisted by so many talented folks, particularly Julie Schoen and others. And this project is absolutely first class. So I'm hoping that if you know law enforcement and you have working relationships with your local law enforcement, please, please, please make sure that they are familiar with this. It's got the laws of every single state in here. There's drop-down menus, there's checklists. So helpful guide. You know, when I started in 1996, there was nothing like this. But for new beginners, for people who are being introduced to this area for the first time, this is a phenomenal platform. So please make sure that EAGLE spread the word. Also, we've got to convince more prosecutor offices to designate somebody, as I call it, to be that person that Adult Protective Services can pick up the phone and call, that person that the ombudsman can speak to, that person that the first responding officer out in the field can call up and say, hey, what do I do with this case? You know, most large prosecutors' offices have units, particularly domestic violence units, child abuse units, but not so many of them have equally elder abuse units. We've got to make sure that there is an assigned person. And even in the rural counties, we've got to persuade the elected prosecutor to assign somebody as part of their general duties to be that person to collaborate with other agencies. It is so important to keep a consistency and to have that person trained in elder abuse matters. Another huge topic that I'm passionate about is creating or enhancing more multidisciplinary teams all over the country. We were fortunate in San Diego during my 22 years to be part of several innovative and successful multidisciplinary teams. And I have learned so much from sitting around a table, maybe over a brown bag sandwich or over a cup of coffee, with people from Adult Protective Services, from law enforcement, from financial institutions, from the ER, from the mental health clinics, from the gerontology department of our local university, and talking over case reviews, talking over the welfare of an individual. How can we assist this person? What needs to be done? And I think about this whole thing of collaboration, cooperation, and communication. Those are my 3 C's. So whenever I would stand in front of a jury and give an opening statement in a trial, I was so aware that this may not ever have been made possible were it not for the collaborative efforts of a multidisciplinary team. That it took somebody to make that call to Adult Protective Services, that it took APS to go out and recognize that this was a founded case of elder abuse. It took the APS caseworker to cross-report to law enforcement. It took a dedicated officer to investigate. It took a medical doctor to give us a prognosis. And then for everyone to bring me this case and to give me the privilege of presenting it to a jury. And I tell you that so many of these cases would not have been successful were it not for the collaboration from MDTs. I've learned this. I've learned that it takes all of us to keep our older adults safe. One of the exciting projects that I've been working with in the last couple of years is trying to assist some states with building stronger multidisciplinary teams. I've been working with the state of Hawaii, with the state of Montana, and with the state of Maine. And it's really exciting to be part of this vision to bring together federal agencies, state agencies, county agencies, and to work together towards protecting the lives of older adults. You know, speaking about Hawaii, this image is so much in my mind. When we work together, when we are in sync, and those of you who've been fortunate enough to actually be in Hawaii, you've seen these people out there on the ocean waves in their outrigger canoes. And aren't you struck by their synchronicity and how when they're all rowing at the same time, how speedily they rip through the waves. And that's the image that I want to bring to you, and hopefully we can really replicate all over this country. And the people who will benefit most are the older adults. I also think, as part of the MDT group, particularly financial institutions need to be part of the solution. So many crimes are occurring because people are withdrawing funds from their institution. They are being scammed, they're being exploited, they're being ripped off. And so I know that credit unions and banks, stockbroker agencies can be part of the solution. You know, there's this debate going on right now, which really rankled with me last week. Zelle is something you may use, but unfortunately, it's being used by the fraudsters out there. And this article came out last week that suggests that banks are ignoring the widespread problem of fraud on Zelle. And what Zelle is trying to do is suggest that if you are being scammed, if you have been scammed, and you authorized the payment, that this is different from a fraud because you've consented to the transaction, and therefore you may not be able to get your money back. Now, I totally disagree with this interpretation. A scam, in my book, is a fraud. And I don't believe that there is such a thing as authorizing the transaction when you are a victim, because you've been tricked, you've been duped, you've been told lies. And the only reason you consented was because you believed what you were being told was the truth. We need more collaboration in investigating and identifying and apprehending scammers. And I'm seeing more and more signs of romance scams out there. And now the scammers are using cryptocurrency. They're asking the victims to purchase cryptocurrency, Bitcoins. And when that happens, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible sometimes, to chase and track the money. Now, we're seeing more different types of scams. Whenever there's a disaster, whenever there's a crisis, the fraudsters go to work. What are we seeing right now? We're seeing a plethora of scams being perpetrated by the fraudsters in order to get you and I to give money to what we believe is the Ukraine relief efforts, but it's going into the pockets of scammers and fraudsters. We're seeing also the new scam, or fairly new scam, of using fake QR codes. The fraudsters are actually posting these fake QR codes onto shop windows and other places. And when you are applying your phone to that, it's then connecting you to the fraudsters, and then they can apparently infiltrate the information from your phone. And we need to tell everyone about Glenda Sign. Now, I'm just realizing, Nicole and others on the technical side, that I didn't click the button for videos, and I'm not sure if this is going to come out, but I'm going to play it for you. But if it does, if the sound doesn't come out, can you let me know and I'll stop it?
My name is Glenda and I'm 81 years old. In 2014, I met the love of my life online, and he told me that he was a U.S. citizen and was working in Nigeria. He asked me for money to help with his business and help leave Nigeria. Then my love had people send me electronics like cell phones so I could pawn them and send him the money. When I couldn't get the money that he wanted, he asked me to open personal and business bank accounts. Since 2015, bank employees, local police officers, and federal agents told me that my love was a scam and that I needed to stop or I could go to jail. I didn't listen to anyone else but my love, the love I've never seen nor spoken to. Now I don't have a choice of whom I'll listen to. On November the 2nd, 2021, I pled guilty to 2 federal felonies. I'll be listening to the judge now.
And in fact, Glenda was sentenced 2 weeks ago by that judge to 5 years probation. Obviously wasn't given any custody because she was helpful in providing this public service announcement. But that is a warning. There are so many older adults out there who are being trapped into this money mule situation. So we need to do a better job of warning people. We also need to create a better response to uncovering and identifying crimes occurring in long-term care communities. As I reflect on the 22 active years of prosecuting crimes of elder abuse in the county of San Diego, the one area that I really regret that we weren't able to really make a dent in is this. And I really believe that we have got to work far more closely, particularly with the 2 state agencies in California that issue licenses and issue citations and revoke licenses. For example, assisted living facilities is community care licensing in California, and I have to give them a shout out because they did reach out. And we were so able to improve the working relationship and try to uncover more crimes. There's also the Department of Public Health that oversees skilled nursing facilities. I think there is room for improvement to improve the relationships between DPH and law enforcement and prosecutors, and for there to be more of a transparency so that at the beginning of an investigation by DPH, law enforcement and prosecutors are immediately informed and, in fact, maybe requesting assistance to help DPH uncover crimes. You know, these crimes are going on all the time. Here's one from just a few weeks ago. This is so commonplace: financial exploitation by a staff member in a community like this in Kansas. Last week, before the State of the Nation address, President Biden announced that there would be some initiatives and to cure, hopefully, some impediments in the nursing home care industry. One of the biggest problems, as we all know, is understaffing of particular communities. And so that is a step in the right direction, but there's so much more that we need to be doing so that in the event that one of our loved ones enters one of these communities, hopefully there will be some measure of confidence that this is a safe environment, that they will be protected, that there's an adequate amount of staffing, and that the staffing that is hired doesn't have a criminal record. Now, one of the programs that we adopted in San Diego, which I think is really fantastic and which I would love to see spread all over the country, is called Choose Well. Excuse me. One of the dilemmas for families is, what assisted living facility could I choose? And in San Diego, we had this program where over 200 assisted living facilities willing to provide information and subscribe to certain conditions. So if you want to know more about it, just Google Choose Well San Diego. We also need to understand how COVID has impacted the elder justice movement. For example, we need to be aware that defendants have been released without fulfilling their length of sentence, particularly those who are considered to be non-violent. So we need to watch out for that. And what we're also seeing is that somebody who's been arrested, particularly for an elder financial exploitation case, very often they're not even having to put up bail. They're given a ticket, told to report back at a later date, and sometimes that later date could be as long as 6 months away. One of the concerns I have because of COVID is, how do we preserve older victims' testimony without getting into legalese? One of the issues that we always deal with is called hearsay. And it's so very important, excuse me, particularly in my throat, so important at the earliest opportunity is to have the victim testify under cross-examination from the defense lawyer. If that happens, even if the victim then subsequently either falls into incapacity or passes away, we have their testimony preserved. So we've got to do a better job, particularly in the light of COVID, dealing with delays in court systems. How do we get our elderly victims' testimony preserved? One thing that I still have not resolved in my own mind is, on the one hand, being aggressive as a prosecutor in terms of going after and targeting elder abusers, versus this whole area of discussion called restorative justice. I have to admit, I've been suspicious, I've been skeptical about restorative justice programs. But I have to say to myself, Greenwood, there's got to be some truth in this. There's got to be some middle ground, and I am trying to work towards that. Am I still on the side of aggressive prosecution? Yes, but I have to listen to those who are telling me very softly and very firmly, Greenwood, there is possibly an alternative to aggressive prosecution. And I know that in time to come, this will be very much something that I will be wrestling with and dealing with. But I do believe that we're on the right track for so many reasons. You know, we are now part of an elder justice movement, something which I could not have envisaged back in January of 1996. The fact that we are having lunch and learns, the fact that right now there are 137 participants on this webinar on a Thursday in March when you could be watching basketball, but instead you're dealing with another type of March Madness. And we have come so far. And the words that I would leave with this reflection is, if we continue to pursue justice with the 3 Ps that I often talk about, and I think those of you who've heard me speak before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Why do I use the letter P? Because my name is Paul, and I used to be a prosecutor. And I talk about passion, I talk about purpose, and I talk about perseverance. And when we meet people who exude these 3 things, I tell you what, they can be game changers in the landscape of elder justice. If we continue also to not accept the status quo, don't be accepting of where we are right now. Please always look for something more. And I'm not talking about being dissatisfied with life, but I'm talking on a professional level. Don't just accept what we have. We can do better. And I know we will do better as we continue to collaborate together. And my final point is this: if we continue to always ask questions, you know, the art of questioning seems to me to be a dying art. The example I like to refer to is one where I've learned over years and years of being in the courtroom, doing direct examination of witnesses or cross-examination of witnesses. In law school, they used to teach us that don't ever ask a question of a witness to which you do not already know the answer. Now, I frankly find that boring and uncreative, if that's a word. And so I would always ask questions in the courtroom of a witness to which I would have no clue which way it was going to go. Sometimes it could hurt my case. Oftentimes it would actually enhance the case. And there were times when the defense attorney would get upset with me because they'd be looking through all their discovery and they could not find an interview where the witness had been stating these facts that they had just told in response to my question. And so the judge would tell me and the defense attorney to take the witness outside, away from the jury, and talk to the witness. And we would do that. And we would say this: why is it that today is the first time you've ever mentioned this? And the answer was always the same: nobody ever asked me that before. The longer I've been in this business, the more I accept the fact that people know more than we give them credit for. And the only way we're going to find out information that can enhance our case or weaken our case, and actually weakening the case is not a bad thing, because none of us want to be prosecuting an innocent party. So if it actually points towards not guilty, so be it. But inevitably, if we ask the questions, we will find out more. And so before we take questions, and I hope there will be questions, this is my contact information. This is my name, obviously Paul at greenwoodlawcorp.com. I have a website, just type in greenwoodlawcorp.com, and it will explain to you what I'm involved in now. 2 prongs. One prong is training, doing presentations. And if you feel that there's a presentation that I can give to your group, to your agency, I would be delighted and thrilled to do it. If it's in person, even better, as COVID disappears, hopefully. And secondly, I've offered myself in some limited situations as a witness, an expert witness in any kind of civil or criminal case involving allegations of elder abuse. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Nicole and see if we have any questions that we can take.
Paul, thank you so much. That was really exciting to hear you talk about the transitions of your career and how you've seen the elder justice field and community come together. It's, as someone who came in later than 1996, it's good to know the foundations that were laid so long before that and how we still work together to achieve our goals. I also just want to say thank you for bringing up the part that you talked about, how it can be so easy to get frustrated and stressed and feel like you're not effective, and why it's important to have lives outside of work. I think all of us on this call have worked really hard for our entire careers, but especially the last 2 years. And I want to make sure that our audience hears that Paul Greenwood is telling you to have a life.
Yes.
And I also want to ask folks or invite you to go ahead and put your questions in the chat or Q&A. For those of you that ask, where will you get the materials? We will send out the PowerPoint and the recording next Tuesday. So just look out for that. As long as you registered, you will receive it. This is a great time to get your questions answered from the great Paul Greenwood. But you can't ask him how old he was on his last birthday. That's the one question that's on the table. Paul, I'll go ahead and start with mine. And I'm so glad to hear that you talking about restorative justice, that it may be a tool that we could use to work with older adults. Can you tell us maybe in some examples or in some instances where you think it is effective and maybe where you think it's not as appropriate?
Well, thanks for it. That's a tough one, Nicole. Yeah, because you see, for all those years, I never even contemplated restorative justice. I was always of the opinion that in order to help, and I'm now going to focus on the suspect defendant, who is the son of the elderly mother that he has physically abused. And he financially exploited her by stealing her jewelry and pawning it at a local pawn shop. And then when she found out, she confronted him and he smacks her in the face, or he pushes her and she breaks her hip. Those are the kind of cases where I feel that restorative justice is not appropriate, because we're not dealing with the underlying issue. And the underlying issue is where I'd always try to go. I would ask the mother, why did he want to steal your jewelry? What is his problem? What is his addiction? And invariably it was either gambling, alcohol, or drugs. And we would then have this discussion with the victim. Have you tried to help him? Yes, I've tried many ways, but nothing has worked. And that's why I've always gone more to the side of prosecution, because within prosecution, you have an inbuilt program that the judge will direct the defendant to attend. And if the defendant has no prior serious criminal record, I will then throw out an incentive. I will say to the defendant, okay, if you comply with the judge's rules, and if you fulfill all these conditions over the next 18 months, have your lawyer contact me. And if everything's going well, I will probably agree to reduce your felony conviction to a misdemeanor. Now, that didn't work in every case, but I tell you what, it did work in a lot of cases. And so I'm more of the view that there should be a lot of compassion in prosecution, but also a lot of understanding as to what is the underlying feature that is motivating the criminal conduct. Because I don't think restorative justice will get you to the program that the defendant will need to attend, because there's no incentive for him or her to fulfill that program.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. I too have had some evolution of my thoughts around this. I also wonder if we could offer that when it works well, it's when there's a family around the situation who recognize that what happened is wrong, is committed to making sure it doesn't happen again, but wants to keep the family relationship. I think that's been a really, where I've seen it most effective is when it's not just two people, but a family or community that's really ready to address this together.
True.
Well, with that, Paul, we're getting ready to sign off. Do you have any last words for us?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for being part of the movement. And this is a movement which I believe is heading in the right direction. But we also need to face reality. There's going to be more and more of these crimes out there. As we come out of the other side, hopefully, of COVID, as more and more people get back to what we call pre-COVID type work environments, as more and more adult protective service workers get into people's homes, undoubtedly, we're going to see more and more allegations of different types of elder abuse. I was on a call yesterday with somebody from a financial institution. They are seeing a plethora of reports coming through of scams, of frauds. And so we should be left in no doubt that we are facing potential avalanche of these cases. We mustn't get daunted. We mustn't get overwhelmed. As you said, and Nicole, to remind us all, we need to keep a balance, but at the same time, keep striving forward with advocating for our elders, but also advocating for yourselves. You need the resources. Those of you who are out there in the front lines, everybody needs an iPad. Everybody needs a smartphone. Everybody needs training. And this can only be accomplished with appropriate funding on a county, state, and federal level. And the only way that the legislature is going to listen to us is if we collect data, present it to them, and let them know the true blunt facts of what's going on out there in this big wide world. But thanks to things like this, we can stay informed and spread the word and share. And don't forget, please, maybe tomorrow, maybe this weekend, let somebody that you care about know how much they are appreciated. Don't wait for their eulogy.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think that is the perfect way to end. I know on behalf of our community how much we appreciate you, how much the community means to you as well. And so with that, I wish you a wonderful day. Elder Justice Warriors, we will be back here next month talking about housing for older adults who've been the victim of a crime, or I should say have survived a crime. We look forward to seeing you back here next month, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thanks so much.